Hey there, welcome to episode 21 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo, recording this in the morning of April 3rd, 2024. Happy Wednesday, although you can listen to this whenever you like. After episode 21, today we are speaking about the wild blue yonder. Up we go into it. That's a Air Force lyric. Anyway, I was always fascinated with flight. Where did it get me? Always back to the same place, for better or worse, even with hundreds of thousands of frequent flyer miles. But I did have some adventures up in the air and on the ground. Today's links in this episode, hopefully wherever you found this audio program, in the show description. The usual self-promotion, buy me a coffee, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. I use it as a place to keep track of links to my various projects. I will say, for the moment, I'm still using Spotify as this sort of primary publication point. The podcast portal also starts with P. Now, the podcaster feature for Spotify that they purchased from Anchor.fm, which I was already using before. They are presently moving to a single sign-on configuration, harbinger for bad news. So, for the moment, I'm linking to our Spotify profile on the Spotify for Podcasters platform. I don't know what they call it. So at present, my 4 weekly programs are linked from there to the Spotify site. Each has its own website, which I will begin transitioning to as the primary publication point platform portal. That will also be indicated on the buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo website. One nice thing about using a completely free external site or tool or platform or however you want to look at it is that even if one of my websites goes down or I add a new one, or doesn't matter, whatever happens, there is a independent location where one might look and see, oh, okay, there's a link to the new place where to find that audio program. That episode is now in its new home. So keep up with that. You are under no obligation to buy me a coffee. Although if you do want to, I've linked to some of my favorite beans. I've recently added white coffee to my menu, I guess. Interesting. That might be worth an entire episode right there. White coffee, the lightest of light roasts, pre-ground in espresso grind, because it is, if you don't know this, the more you roast a coffee bean, the softer it gets. Or the more brittle, I suppose. Better use a correct term. So it becomes more brittle, more easily ground. If you were to grind the lightest of light roast white coffee in a home grinder, you might shorten the life of that grinder. So pre-ground, it's pretty good. So buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo, if for no other reason than to know where to find my audio programs and other projects from one convenient, free for me and free for you online location. Same with ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo. So check those out. You are more than welcome to support the show financially through those. No obligation whatsoever. Now on with the show-related links. The Beechcraft T34 Mentor will make an appearance later in the story. It was from what I understand, if my information is correct, the last of the propeller-driven trainer aircraft used in the United States Air Force, possibly in the Navy as well. The Air Force would switch to the T-37 Tweety Bird, I believe it is. T-37 is a straight wing, thick wing, side-by-side pilot trainee aircraft. It's a little unusual, but it's a jet-powered plane. Fun story. Since I've never been in a T-37, but I was at Williams Air Force Base. And one of the instructors there was telling us a story about how they always say bail out, bail out, bail out. They say it 3 times. Why? Well, in this case, they had a student who decided to hear the word bailout once, and the student pulled the handles, ejecting from the aircraft on the ground. And I do not believe T-37 had 0-0, so I don't recall if the person was injured. They may have been, but fun story. It's a cool plane. Frankly, I'm surprised more people don't own retired T-37s for general aviation. Be kind of cool. Maybe it's not safe. I don't know. T-34, I've been in one of those. We'll get to that. The United States Air Force Academy, a link to their website. I almost attended. I'll get into that. I actually ended up doing a few months of ROTC, the Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps, in college. I just went to Harvey Mudd instead of the U.S. Air Force Academy, and then pivoted. I'll get into that a little bit. Skydive Hollister, now called Silicon Valley Skydiving. Skydive Hollister was the place we went to jump out of a perfectly good airplane, which I will also talk about. I have no idea if Silicon Valley skydiving is the same or better. All I can tell you is at Skydive Hollister, we jumped out of an airplane, and fast forward to now, I'm still here. So that worked. Airplanes, always fascinated. I was completely fascinated as a young person. I would be able to identify all of the aircraft on the tarmac and which airplane we would be flying on the rare occasion that we would fly somewhere. Pictures of airplanes, books about airplanes. Airplanes were it. My bedroom was festooned with photos of aircraft all over the walls. I was that into it. And I had great eyesight when I was younger, which is a thing. When I was about 12, my mom had a flight instructor she knew. She actually was friends with the instructor's mom. So the mom network brought me to his Cessna, probably a 154. I don't think it was his. It was a 152 or 154. A little Cessna. We jumped in, and I had a introductory flight lesson from this instructor. I want to say his name was Merle. Is that possible? I can't remember. Something like that. Nice guy. Great guy. Great time. Good instruction. I remember he said, "Do you want to learn how to do a stall?" And I was immediately like, no. To be honest, I had visions of being in our 1969, I think it was a 1969 Volkswagen Bug, and that stalling. So to me, a stall was not a good thing. But anyway, it was a good time. Only cemented my interest. So it was another step along the path of what I would have wagered money. In fact, arguably, you do kind of wager money if you actually are pursuing something actively, right? I did ponder and considered very seriously the fact that I would someday be a pilot in the United States Air Force. I was visiting our grandparents, my sister and I, when I was 10. So only 9 and 10, I think. So only two years before this instruction flight. And my first introductory lesson. My grandfather, my dad's father, was a engineer, a chief engineer on a B-24 Liberator in the United States Naval Reserve during World War II. So they actually went out on submarine patrols, I guess, and so on. So among other things, he was convinced that I would be a Navy pilot. Navy pilots are better. Either way. So age 12, got the introductory lesson. I was attending Royal Palm Junior High School, which was already outside of our school district. I had been attending Horizon Elementary, formerly called Unit 10. It was brand new when I entered the first grade there, and went there for 7 years. No, 5 years. Went there for 5 years and found it was lacking in certain things. So moved over to Royal Palm Junior High School in the Washington Elementary School District. I was in the Glendale Elementary School District. And eventually the time came to decide where to go to high school. I could either return to Apollo High School, which was, about a mile of walking, or I could stay with my newfound classmates from my recent adventures in this new school. So I took all the time to reacclimate to a new population of people. All the students at Royal Palm had gone to, what was the name of that school? I can't remember. An elementary school. There were about 2 or 3 different elementary schools, but I think most of them went to one elementary school. So they had known each other for, 8, even 9 years. So I was the newcomer, kind of got comfortable with the new surroundings. So the time came to go to a new school. So would it be Apollo or would it be Sunny Slope High School in Phoenix, deep in Phoenix, something like 10 miles away from where my parents lived. I think it was about 10 miles. Central and Dunlap, quite a drive, especially when I didn't have a car. So I'd be taking the city bus. So all that, I would need to get a variance. So turns out that Sunny Slope High School had an AFJ ROTC program where Apollo had a Navy ROTC program. JROTC, Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps. So we filled out the variance forms, and I was interested in attending for the purpose of participating in the AFJ ROTC program on the Sunny Slope High School campus, given my plans to pursue an appointment at the United States Air Force Academy or pursue some sort of a pilot role in the Air Force. So this was two great tastes. I actually did want to do those things, so it wasn't playing a fast one. And so I got to go to the school with the people I already knew, more recently knew, and I was pursuing my aircraft dreams. So Sunny Slope High School was. Participation in the AFJ ROTC unit at Sunny Slope High School went pretty well. I rose through the ranks. Each year at that time, there would be a class of one or two classes of freshmen, first year students. Mostly not sure why they signed up for ROTC. Trying to figure out, what is this? Why am I here? What am I doing? Getting fit for your uniform, which you were required to wear one day a week, and participating in the various drill and other sort of militaristic, paramilitary activities was not for everyone. And so the freshman class, the first year student class, was always the biggest, the largest, probably 35 people. If there were two of them, you're looking at 50 to 70 students the first year. By the time the second year, sophomore year, rolled around, you'd probably lose at least half. So usually one classroom not full of second year students, and then third and fourth, junior and senior, you're looking at a dozen of each maybe. So by that time, the classes turned into more of a study period. There was still classwork and whatnot, but it wasn't focused so much on, early Air Force history and military standard operating procedures, drill and ceremonies, et cetera, et cetera. So me being the type to get involved with things like this, I participated in the drill team, in the color guard. I was a what do you call the element? I was an element leader. So you sat at the front of a row. Each row was an element of a flight. I was eventually flight commander. I would move on to be first sergeant. Then I can't remember what I was junior year, but senior year, of course, squadron commander. So I was pretty proactive. I was obviously gunning for my appointment. So having a history and good references from the Air Force JROTC unit, connections to our other military folks that were in charge of recruiting and other. So Captain Byers, eventually Major Byers from the United States Air Force, would award me my Air Force ROTC scholarship when I got that. But I say all this because early on, somewhere around sophomore year, there was a group of four of us who somehow, because the other three people were, all three of them were problematic, but somehow they arrived at a group of four of us who would be invited to climb aboard a T-34 one at a time in the back seat and take a flight in the T-34. I would have two flights. So one flight was with the owner, and I cannot remember who that was. And the second flight would be later, junior year or so, with our non-commissioned officer instructor, Sergeant Macmillan. In that flight, we did not go aerobatic, but the first flight with the four students. So I think I was the last one. Everybody was coming back, hanging out. The canopy was open, hanging out over the fuselage, sick to their stomachs and so on. So I was like, interesting. So when we went up, We flew around. We flew over the high school. It was at Deer Valley Airport if you're in the Phoenix area. So took off from Deer Valley Airport. We rotated up off the runway, stayed on the runway path, wheels up, snap roll, track smoke, flew out over the desert, approached some low hills, some short mountains, flew between them at 50 feet above. This was when Libya was bombed by some F-111 fighters back then. So he was describing that we were about the same height as they were flying. You could feel the ground effect from the heat rising off of the desert. It was kind of cool, kind of interesting. Did a quick climb, not vertical, but a quick climb up a mountain, not a face, but the contour of the mountain. Did a split S, which was probably the best part. Did a roll. Later we would do a touch and go. I had some time on the stick, so I was flying around, not quite as adventurous with the aerobatics. But it was definitely a good time. No sickness, no illness, no spatial disorientation, nothing. So good for me. Good times. When we landed, of course, the stories began. How did you get sick? Did you? Nope. So it was a good time. I think during my senior year, one of the Air Force Academy graduates of our high school squadron who went on to go to the Air Force Academy had returned to visit. His name was Tony something. And I think he had gone up for a flight in T-34 with Sergeant McMillan. I don't know if it was at that time or if it was a previous occasion, but they had a story about how whoever was in the back seat, whoever was in the front seat, they take off. They are still in the hundreds of feet, 100, 200, they're very shortly after takeoff, the first 30 seconds. Engine stalls. Remember that? But the engine stalled, not the wings. So the engine stops. And they described how, he said, the first thing you got to do is keep the airplane in the air. So you immediately start going through the checklist. Because there were two of us, we split the work of checking through all the instruments and keeping the nose up and not stalling the wings. And getting the engine restarted, coming back around, returning. So which they did. So it was an interesting tale. Teamwork, the classic aviate, navigate, communicate paradigm came into play immediately. The ability to revert to training in the event of an emergency and to work together to do that was interesting. So these were all bonus educational items for those of us who stuck with the program for a few years. Kind of fun. I did watch Air Force Now movies each month. I did take at least one practice ASVAB, Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, sort of your career planning and placement test for the United States military. I learned navigation from our main instructor, a retired lieutenant colonel who had been flying as a navigator in C-5 Galaxy aircraft, usually in Asia. Countless trips to air shows. We could go in uniform and help work the show. So we would help guiding people, keeping them off the flight line, keeping them on the tarmac if it was at an Air Force base, keeping them away from certain areas. But we could jump into the planes, not the fighters, but we could, it was fun. It was fun having the access, hanging around the airplanes, watching the shows. I went to drill team competitions, performed as a member of the color guard at various events and so on, priming the pump for my flying future. I was basically all in on this culture, mostly because it was a high school class and it was fun. I was business. I wasn't messing around, but you could very easily rise to the top by just taking it seriously and not being a typical high school student. So I was pursuing my appointment the summer between junior and senior year of high school. I was able to attend the summer scientific seminar, which I have no idea if they still do this, pursuing my academy appointment at the United States Air Force. So I would fill out the form to begin. So filling out the application for the summer scientific seminar was commencing the application process for a United States Academy appointment, in this case, Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. I had a personal recommendation at the time from former Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater. That was interesting. That would all go to first term Senator John McCain. in Arizona, senator. So I was interviewed by his committee. John McCain wanted to send me to the Annapolis Naval Academy. And I was really bent on Colorado Springs. Not that I was anti-Navy. And, in hindsight, it probably would have been as cool, or maybe being on the East Coast again from whence I came would have been fun and interesting. But I was really bent on the Air Force and on Colorado Springs as a lovely campus. Once I visited the campus for the week for the S3, which was totally fun, by the way. Once again, you're not living the life of a plebe, a first-year student, nor the academy lifestyle. You're basically hanging out. We use some of the design tools to design balsa wood gliders. And then we had a little competition to see who could fly the longest in the enclosed football field stadium. We took some other classes. We ate in the chow hall every day, did some drill and ceremony stuff, but I don't think everybody was required to be a ROTC person. So not everybody knew drill and ceremonies. Not everybody had their personal grooming standards, meeting the Air Force requirements, and so on. So it was a very casual week. So you kind of got a taste, but it was not an honest look at living at the academy. So, but it was fun. It was fun for me. It was not, however, it did not encourage me to want to be in the life 24/7. During my freshman year of high school, my high school guidance counselor, with whom I only had casual conversations throughout my career at Harvey Mudd. My career at Sunny Slope High School. But he, probably the only useful thing he did, I don't mean to say he was not useful, but his target audience was a little bit less directed. But we had our initial meeting. My mom came to the campus. We had our three-way meetup about my future plans. I would be running out of math runway at the high school because of my advancement through the math program at my junior high school. So he had said, well, he's going to be out of math. Maybe you should consider a school like MIT or Caltech or Harvey Mudd. And that was the seed planted. Harvey Mudd. Interesting. So this many years later, senior year, I was considering, do I really want to go to the Air Force Academy and do the 24/7? I don't really want to go to Annapolis. I would be eligible for the level 1 or type 1 ROTC, Air Force ROTC scholarship. If I wanted to take that, I could attend Arizona State University with a full ride. What is it called? The Regent Scholar program. So because I was in the top whatever percent of my graduating class, I was eligible for a free education at one of the state universities. So decisions. I decided to take the level 1 scholar, type 1. I think it was type 1 scholarship, attend. I would get in eventually to Harvey Mudd College, and I would participate in the ROTC program at Harvey Mudd, sort of. So Harvey Mudd College did not have a squadron on campus. They would come and visit I think it was every week. They would make a trip from USC, where the squadron was based, and they would take over the mud hole, I think. They would take over the student union for half a day or something and have some sort of a class. The participation at Harvey Mudd was very small. I want to say 2 or 3 students in each year, maybe more, maybe 5, but that number dwindled just like in high school. So you'd have the true believers. There were a couple of students who I noticed in my first few weeks, upper class people in uniform wandering around. So, okay. It turns out, ponder this, I had done 4 years of junior ROTC, which was fun, not quite as serious as AF ROTC. They dropped the J. So any senior upper class person, 4-year student at Harvey Mudd College in the ROTC program, had either as much or possibly slightly less experience with all of this as I did. This doesn't go well with strong personalities. So my first days as a freshman, first year AF ROTC student, they wanted us to go to USC either weekly or several times a month to participate in activities on that campus. I did not have a car, so getting to the campus was no joy. they also had their own curriculum agenda that did not fit into the Harvey Mudd schedule, not well. And I believe, I'm going to say it was in the first month, we were supposed to do morning activities at Harvey Mudd College. And so one of the freshman students, and by the way, this didn't have to be Harvey Mudd students. It could have been anyone at the Claremont colleges. So one of the freshman students came to our dorm room, stuck her head in our open window, yelled at me to wake up and come to training or whatever we were doing in the morning, picked a stapler up off of the desk that was near the window and threw it at me. And I decided at that point that maybe this was not going to work. Now, I should point out, when I was getting my ROTC, actually it was my physical for my application to the Air Force Academy, I got a free all-day visit to Luke Air Force Base Hospital, where I got a nice physical, blood tests, dilated vision test, hearing, all that, everything. And on my way out, one of the person that was making this determination and signing it said, "I'll tell you what," it was probably the ophthalmologist or optometrist. He said, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you 20/20 on your eye test today, and that will be the last time you ever see those numbers." No pun intended, I'm sure. He said, "Your vision is right on the edge, and it's really not 20/20. So by the time you get to the academy, and certainly by the time you graduate, your eyesight will almost certainly not be pilot ready." And at the time, the Air Force would not accept surgical procedures modifying your eyesight. That is, no keratotomies of any kind. And of course, you could not be wearing glasses when you're in the cockpit. So they said, just be aware. So here I am in the ROTC program at Harvey Mudd. I know I'm probably not going to be a pilot. I did not yet have glasses, but that would change soon enough. So my freshman year, no glasses, but I knew I was going to have glasses. I knew I was probably not going to be a pilot. And this first year student is throwing a stapler at me at 6 a.m. or something. So I went to the financial aid office, Noe Ortiz. I said, "Hey, this ROTC program well, thank you, Amazon product. Hey, this ROTC program really kind of isn't going to work for me. And if I can't be a pilot, not much sense piling on with this silliness." And he was not a fan of the ROTC program for whatever reason, maybe for things like this. So within a week or two, I had a complete replacement of my funding for the school. So I would stay at Harvey Mudd College, student loans, grants, etc., Perkins, Stafford, all these words I'd never heard of. So I handed back the Type 1 scholarship, which was not uncommon. Apparently, ROTC at Harvey Mudd was not a great fit. But I will say, my final discussion with the commanding officer of the squadron, actual commanding officer, not a student, he said, you got like one of the highest scores for the ASVAB that we've seen. Are you sure you don't want to stay in the program? So the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery for the Air Force includes a lot of flight questions, I guess. So given the orientation of its aircraft, given the orientation of the aircraft and these instrument readings, given this sort of direction, navigation, so these are things I had done already. So again, part of the reason for my, I guess, take on the program was that I had already done a lot of the work, and I was questioning whether I could risk my Harvey Mudd education on relearning the same materials I had already learned from people who were newer at it than I was. So a little bit slight ego, but I think much more of a practical consideration. But either way, this was essentially, I'm not going to be flying for the Air Force, which was I'm not going to say, well, maybe a dream of sorts. Not going to be flying for the Air Force. Do I want to tolerate this? So no, I handed back my scholarship. I was done, on with my computer engineering pursuits. So I was getting my engineering degree. That was my selected discipline. Harvey Mudd offers a normal, just standard general engineering degree. So that's what I was pursuing. We pursued a little bit of everything: systems, chemical, electrical, et cetera, et cetera. So I pivoted into that. Turns out I was much more interested, and this was true throughout. I've done an episode on this previously about my computing history I was always interested in computers, arguably more so than flying, because anyone with the wherewithal could use a computer. I've already told these stories about gaining access to Apple II Plus, Apple II Plus, Acorn computers, the odd IBM PC, and of course the VAX at Grand Canyon Community College, and eventually buying a modem with my McDonald's earnings after I got my first computer. We got our first computer after I graduated, quote unquote, graduated from 8th grade. So computing was always hiding in the wings, pun intended. So not becoming an Air Force pilot, and in fact, as I would learn later, there was a drawdown of personnel, of pilot count in the Air Force. So the people that did stick it out and did have to do a 5-year commitment for their 4-year degree ended up getting that cut early. I can't remember what they were calling it officially, but so you basically had to serve like 2 or 3 years, I think, maybe. So in hindsight, would I have done better to stick with the ROTC scholarship and then, well, I didn't know that, do the 2 or 3 years, not as a pilot. So then the question was, okay, would I have gotten what I wanted from that? Or did it work out better that I participated in the Silicon Valley.com boom, all that entailed, and all of the frustrations that has led to today, looking back at that, and places like Vegas that want to be the next Silicon Valley. So all in all, I was reasonably happy with the pivot at the time. And then of course, I think it worked out better for me in hindsight. And again, I still have glasses today. My vision is certainly not what it was on that fateful day, my final 2020 eye exam. So I would work. I would eventually get my degree from Harvey Mudd College in 1993. I would move up to Silicon Valley. I started working at a host of different companies, which is something I've also talked about in a previous episode. Now, the relevant part, the long path to get to here. I was walking on it was technically the outdoor hallway. So there were 2 halves of the Mariani 1 office. So there was the side on the, what was the name of that street? Saratoga, Sunnyvale? Saratoga, I guess. There was the side of the building on the, what would that be, like the south side, I guess? Southeast, facing the Apple campus. And then there was the opposite side. So they were connected with these outdoor bridge, like not pedestrian. They were not sky bridges, but you would leave one half of the building, so you had to have badge access. You could literally, and this happened to people, you could literally be stuck outside on this hallway with no exit, unless you were climbing down from, we were on the top floor, so 3rd floor, I think. Pretty idiotic when you think about it. But anyway, so I was walking to the north/west side, and I was approached, coming the other direction, by Bob Hager, colleague, coworker. We were both contractors. And he pointed at me, he said, "Hey, do you want to go skydiving this weekend?" And I almost without hesitation said, okay. And he stopped and kind of looked stunned, like, really? And I said, yeah. He's like, okay, I'll pick you up. We're heading down to Skydive Hollister. So, fun fact, I had certainly within the month before that, but probably 2 weeks before that or something, I had been down in Southern California visiting my college roommates. We were at Magic Mountain. Magic Mountain had a new ride, Batman, a suspended track. So your feet were dangling. The track was overhead. It had just launched. The lines were huge. I had been to Magic Mountain many times. That's probably a whole nother episode right there. But Magic Mountain in Valencia, California. So I shot down there to visit my roommates. We took the day into the evening. And I remember being in line for the Batman ride. And I don't know how we got talking about, like, how fun would it be if there was like an ejection seat ride, or so it would launch you in the air and then you'd land with a parachute, or maybe a skydiving ride that would just fire you into the air like in a cannon or something. So we were literally just talking about this, and that the notion of skydiving was thus planted, some sort of a psyop or something. So we we made the plan. And so I was all in. It was myself and Bob driving, and there was another. I don't know if he was an employee yet, but there was another colleague, an older guy named Jim, and I cannot remember his last name. He was a contractor. He would eventually be an employee. He was very, very cynical. A really nice guy. I actually had been to his house up in the North Bay. He had a ridiculous commute every day, so he was all in on Apple. Really nice guy, though. So the three of us went, Bob driving, down to Hollister. We get there. We pay our, I don't know, I want to say it was like $100. Pretty reasonable back in, was it 95, I think? I have my jump certificate somewhere. We did our ground school. We would be jumping tandem, so I would be attached to a more experienced, since this is my first time jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, I'd be attached to a tandem jumper. So there was ground school going over how it worked, how you would be hooked up, and how you would leave the aircraft and all that. And they made a point of pointing out, of demonstrating with a video. And stop me if you've heard this one. If you jump out of an airplane and you open your parachute, you do not travel up. If you are not familiar with moving frames of reference and all that, your high school physics, you may have thought that when you open your parachute, you suddenly change direction and go shooting up without knowing that, of course, the camera, thanks to the way they want to film and capture your chute opening, doesn't open their chute until later. And so the camera is moving down faster than you. You are not moving up. So they were very clear to point that out to assuage that myth. So I found that funny. Eventually we'd meet our tandem person. My skydiver had jumped 800 times. He was taller than me. So big guy. And 800 jumps. So I figured, okay, 800, that's a good number. Let's keep it going. So we get in the airplane, we sit. There were two benches running the length of the aircraft. It was a twin engine. I do not recall what sort of aircraft it was. Twin engine, door in the back, empty, but for these sort of long picnic bench style benches. The deal was you would sit with your one leg on either side of the bench. So you're facing the back of the plane. You're sitting in front of your tandem jumper. They're going to hook up the top of the harness. So you're connected to their top clips. And then once you'd stand up to head towards the exit, they would hook up the bottom clips, and then you would get busy. So we were sitting at the absolute front of the plane. So the pilot was on the left side of the plane, of course. We were essentially on the right, facing backwards. And so I was chatting with the pilot briefly about some skydiving movies that had just come out. I found it funny that the pilot was also wearing a parachute, not something you see all the time. So some very brief idle chit-chat, but we were over the jump site, and so people started exiting the aircraft. And because in the minute or so that I was talking to the pilot, this was not a deep conversation, so I wasn't really distracting the pilot, but it was the pilot and my tandem jumper. They said, okay, it's your turn. And I looked back to the rear of the aircraft, and it was empty. And that is a weird feeling. If you've ever been on an airplane, yes, boarding and exiting a commercial aircraft, sure. But this emptied out startlingly quickly. Like, oh, they're all gone. So we made our way to the rear of the aircraft, clipped in the lower clips. And so you lean out of the aircraft, you check and see where the other jumpers are, if any chutes are open or whatever, so you don't jump in over them. Okay, so that was not my responsibility, but because I was clipped onto this person, he leaned out of the aircraft to see what was happening, and I'm leaning out more, so that was kind of odd. But I remember feeling oddly sort of I wasn't frightened or I wasn't having second thoughts. It was oddly comforting to have this view and to like, oh, we're doing it. Okay. So he's okay. We're going to roll out of the plane. So hold your arms in. So basically the front person would cross your arms in front to keep them out of the way. The tandem, the person with the experience would hold the door frame, and you'd get right up to the edge. So you're hanging, your feet are hanging off like you're on a diving board, and he would pull back and so like do a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and then 3, you would roll out of the plane, which we did exactly that. No issue, no drama. Absolute chaos as far as like, oh, we just jumped out of a plane. And I can remember the wind rushing and the slight disorientation and whatnot. But once you settle and you get into the sort of standard skydive position, by the way, our second NCO when I was in junior ROTC in high school, Sergeant Chris Larry's, was a skydiver. So we had heard some tales of how skydiving worked, and of course the fact that you don't go flying up when your chute opens. So I had some prior knowledge. So once we get into the standard position, we started steering around a little bit. We're not doing aerobatic tricks ourselves, but we're able to maneuver around a little bit, steer with changing your arm positions and so on. Not as easy with a tandem jump, but it was still fun. And we were able to converse slightly when we were in free fall, but then once the chute opened, pretty calm, pretty quiet, very, very serene. I can see where people would want to, the free fall is fun, but once you pop that chute, there is nothing under you. You look past your toes and it's thousands of feet down, complete and total silence, unless there's somebody talking to you. We didn't have too much conversation. He did a quick little that's the airport over there, and that's where we're going to aim for landing over there, and you can see some other open chutes, so don't go in that direction. But I was steering, pulling the handles and stuff. So good times. But yeah, the appeal of skydiving to me was the serenity, I guess, the floating above everything, being able to see. I can see we're jumping in the evening, at dusk or dawn, nice sky view and all that. But yeah, that was definitely the fun part. Then he said, okay, when we come in for a landing, the standard way to go, because you're going to try to coordinate 2 different people running to come to a stop. He said that very rarely works out. So we don't want to land face first. So be ready to pull your legs up, and we'll essentially land in a seated position, the butt slide. Okay. He's like, but we can try to land standing. So we did. So we jumped, we did the free fall, we did the chute open, steering around. We had our plan, and this was, after all that, the moment of truth was, could we land upright? So as we're coming in, we are the final. We were the last ones out of the plane. We're the last ones on the ground. So everyone has already come in for a landing. We are it. As we come in, I can't remember which of us hit first. I did get a little heel pain. I did not land ideally. So I likened it to jumping off of if you imagine those concrete picnic tables in a park, like standard, 32 inch. If you were to jump off one of those, but land more on your heels, you get that that was not good. That kind of level of discomfort. So not major. And we were able to come to a running stop and remained upright. So we got a little nod from the crowd. The guy, Jim, I mentioned, he said, we did not do well. And I ended up landing, we tipped forward and they landed not quite face first, but definitely, he said, that was not a good landing for us. And then Bob did a butt slide. So good times. And then, of course, nonstop stories, retelling and retelling of the few minutes of adventure we had just shared. So yeah, it was a good time. I prefer aerobatic flying now, having done both. If given a chance to jump out of an airplane again or go aerobatic flying, I would take the latter. Mostly because flying is more fun. Jumping out of the airplane, the best part is the quiet serenity. But if you're gonna go through the administrata, the paying of fees and funds, transfers and so on, I think you get more out of flying. You everything from takeoff to landing is more controlled, and it's more you are more proactively involved in the whole thing. Jumping out of an airplane, once you leave the aircraft, you're pretty much, hopefully, you're going to go from whatever altitude to the ground, hopefully in a controlled manner. but you're pretty much on your way down. Aircraft, you're all over the place for the duration. So I personally had more fun aerobatic flying. I could do either. That would be fine. So this many years later, so the flying in the aircraft was in 1987, 1988 in the T-34. The flying in my first flight lesson was in 85, 86. This many years later, the skydiving, so those 3 years. So I've never really been flying much since in a general aviation capacity. I've certainly been on aircraft. I've flown to other countries. By the way, if you ever find yourself in an aircraft and your ears are popping, as they say, more importantly, if a young child or a baby is freaking out because their ears are painful, learn for yourself the Valsalvo maneuver, not the L1. You don't need that. You're not pulling those G's. But the Valsalvo, safely change or adjust the pressure in your eustachian tubes and relieve that pain in your eardrums. I don't know why they don't teach every child this. Learn it. I've never had trouble with pressure in the ears due to altitude change on commercial or other. So you should learn it. So good take home from my time in my various Air Force and other flight related pursuits. If you find yourself with a child near you, all you have to do is just close one nostril. So push one finger, even, baby, put one finger on there, finger to block one nostril. Then you have them exhale, or you can press on their stomach to force an exhale. Don't press hard. And as they are exhaling through their nose, hopefully, you press and release the other nostril. So don't keep it closed. That's how you injure eardrums. But if you kind of pulse it, close, open. So you're kind of tapping that nostril. You will ideally see eventually a little baby smile. It totally works. It is military grade solution for a problem of pressure equalization, eustachian tubes, inner, outer ear. So learn that. I was never into building model aircraft, so I can't even say that I was like a diehard, hands-on airplane person. Turns out I liked the flying part, but I've really come to learn I enjoy more of the control system parts, the computer, the math. So the mechanics of flight were interesting. The implementation of flight, the notion of building my own airplane, home built, the notion of building model airplanes, the notion of even getting into the drone movement, building airframes and implementing motor controllers, both the motor controller part and the flight system controls. Okay, that's interesting. But the mechanics of building aircraft to me seemed like, and this is from the early days, an expensive hobby. I didn't really want to become a general aviation pilot because I know it would become an addiction that would be more expensive than anything, which it is. So I never really got into the building of the model airplanes, much less, time sharing a Cessna or something crazy. So I think the expensive hobby notion led me away from diving into getting, the drone, model airplane, anything, and not even not into flight simulators either. And I'll tell you why. They're very boring. No matter how much, I watched a YouTube video for a few minutes the other day of some A-10s doing strafes on the Japanese Navy during World War II. So could the A-10 stop the attack on Pearl Harbor? Okay. So I guess to keep it fun, you got to come up with these historical anomalies. But mostly flight simulators, if you're not intentionally crashing, or if you're not a pilot, if you're not actually practicing for instrument rating or upping your aircraft rating, right? Like, I'm moving to twin engine, I'm moving to jet, whatever. Without that need, I think the gamer aspect of flight simulators is kind of boring or a little bit silly. And dogfighting is fine. I was able to spend some time in an F-4 simulator at Luke Air Force Base at some point. And so you're doing a head-to-head dogfight thing. It was fun. Okay. So I never really got into that. I was much more into the technology and not the practice, if that makes sense. So in hindsight, I think I learned to enjoy flying. The fact that I understand flying, having done it, I understand the aerobatic part. Not that I'm an aerobatic pilot. Not that I would understand exactly what all the I know what it means to bleed off energy when you're making a high speed turn in a F-16, and the is it tuned to be at Mach 1.2, 1.6 at this altitude and all that. So bleeding energy, the physics of it, the flight control systems, targeting systems, these are all very interesting. Knowing what a what a stall is now, this many years later, knowing the Klein-Fogelman airfoil, very fascinating. Knowing how a canard airframe works versus the traditional opposing forces, tail behind wing, fuselage style, turbojets, turbofan, all the intricacies of the mechanics of flight, completely fascinating. Experimental aircraft and so on. So I think what ended up happening is the engineering side of my brain won out through various circumstances over the I love airplanes and want to fly as a pilot side. So probably ultimately a better circumstance, worked out better for me, I think. I think it's a little bit trickier to be entrepreneurial as a pilot. Not impossible, not by any means, but it's a little bit trickier than being entrepreneurial with a laptop in a coffee shop. So probably worked out better for me. Not that I couldn't have done one and the other, but given the fact that I do not have the vision I once did, not by any stretch, I don't even know how effectively I would have been able to fly aircraft, certainly not military, but would I have been able to fly in a profitable way? My eyesight is not that bad, but I definitely would need correction while in order to operate the aircraft. So would, eye fatigue, general, anyway, the bottom line is I think everything worked out as it was supposed to. I definitely enjoy flying to places, so I don't really have a fear of flying. Boeing may change that. They're making their best effort to make everyone afraid of flying. But in the meantime, I did over 100,000 miles a year while I was working with Intel, traveling around mostly Europe and domestic U.S. I don't really have a problem sitting on an aircraft for 22 hours, which I think was the longest flight ever, the longest scheduled flight on a international travel schedule. I want to say it was United. Was it to Singapore? I went to Singapore. I did not go to Australia. Maybe that one's longer. Either way, I'm totally fine. Sitting in a plane for that long, I find it kind of fun, kind of interesting. It's kind of an adventure. Would I want to fly the plane for 22 hours? No. I'd rather have my laptop or nowadays, I guess, some sort of a VR or AR headgear to play with my laptop or watch a movie or something. So yeah, I think it all worked out for the best, or the better at least. But an interesting time. If you ever have an opportunity to fly an airplane yourself or jump out of one, I would certainly recommend the former. The latter can be tricky. You want to jump with someone who has jumped hundreds or thousands of times. I don't even know if 800 was enough, but things worked out in my case. But knowing what's going on in the world, if you are a traveler, knowing how airplanes work, knowing what happens, knowing, what does it mean when the plane is shaking? What is turbulence? How does that work? How do wings work? Just having a feel for that. When you're in a general aviation aircraft that's very small, you can feel everything. So you feel that ground effect I mentioned earlier, flying, 50 feet over the desert floor. The heat rising will cause buffeting. So it feels like you're actually driving. It's like bumpy road, right? So to understand the feeling, the notion, the effect on your inner ear, how a death spiral works, if you're a JFK Jr. fan, unfortunately. So he was not using his instruments, visual flight rules, and tilting your aircraft. We had by the way, my Air Force JROTC experience was substantially more interesting, I think, than the ROTC experience would have been. We did spend a day at Williams where our NCO, he was formerly based there. So we went through some of their training stuff, the hypobaric chamber, where he actually had his normal day-to-day at the base. Some spatial disorientation training. We did not get to try out the ejection seat trainer. That would have been fun. But spatial disorientation is a real thing. So how does your inner ear work? How does flying affect that? I mentioned the Valsalvo, of course. Understanding what to do when you are feeling dizzy, when you're feeling disoriented, when you, if you're pulling serious G's, how the L1 works. Don't do that. Bottom line, though, I think becoming familiar with how airplanes work, you can jump out of one if you like, but knowing that has been far more valuable to me than following through with my initial plan. So that was kind of interesting to reflect on as I was pondering this episode. And so here we are at the end of it already. How fun is that? I will remind you that you can check out buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo. You're under no obligation to buy me any coffee. I will. This isn't flying, so I will. Actually, we have to change we have to reconfigure our cloud setup for innovateforvegas.org to add some stuff and to reduce the monthly and all that. We're still a charity. You can donate to there, by the way, if you visit innovateforvegas.org, if you want to support that effort. 501c3. That has nothing to do with buying me a coffee, though. So we need to do that. So part of the plan is to do all of this at the same time. So Quaggling Sand, FFS Talk, Cafe Genius, and innovateforvegas.org will all get a little upgrade and start self-hosting the primary point of publication, primary point of podcast publication. Sticking with Spotify, questionable. Google Podcast just went away. So now I have to switch over to YouTube. I already have a YouTube account names for all the things. So that's okay. But it's just the fact, and this is the topic for FFS Talk this week, when you own your own brand, part of that should be owning your online presence, not relying completely on the likes of Spotify or Google Podcasts or whomever. They should be secondary. So I will obviously make that clear on the buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo page and in future podcast audio programs, and I'll update all the show notes to reflect the new primary. We'll continue to publish as secondary to the likes of Spotify and wherever. I got to get iTunes set up. So yeah, all that and more. But in the meantime, get up in the air, explore the wild blue yonder. There's a lot to see. Thank you for listening as always. Catch you later.